Welcome to Founders Unplugged, hosted by Greg McCallum. Long-form, honest conversations with founders and entrepreneurs from around the world. This is part 2 of this episode. Be sure to check out part 1 if you haven't already. Link in the description.
Okay, and we're back for part 2. I'm here with Gavin Johnson, and if you haven't checked out part 1, I highly recommend you do. Otherwise, some of this isn't going to make any sense. There's a bit of a context there. Gavin has introduced himself in part 1 and explained what he's done, and we had a very interesting conversation about background as a lawyer that's led now to him being a founder and all of the nuance there. So highly recommend go and check that out. It came out a couple of days ago. But if not, here you are, fine, you'll figure it out. So yeah, like I mentioned at the end of part 1, Gavin, I'm interested in knowing a bit more then about the product as it is or as it will be, and sort of just kind of how it works. So if you could just really briefly again kind of give us the elevator pitch, because just in case those haven't bothered to watch part 1. And then I've got a few questions I'd really like to dig into sort of how it works or how it's going to work.
Yeah, sure. So let's give the elevator pitch. Okay, so real estate tokenization is the simplest way to put it, but specifically the finance that sits in real estate. And what we're targeting is passion investment. So if you can imagine any real estate where you love to go, the football team you love to support and you want to go and see them, or I don't know, your favorite golf club or your music venue you mentioned. These are all what we call passion real estate. You know, they do something that you love to participate, be part of. And so there's an opportunity, we say, for, let's say, the average person, the man on the street, we might say in the law, to get involved in investing in. But how do you do that? And the only way you can do that efficiently is with technology. And to date, in our view, there's no platform that really facilitates that passion investment at an accessible price point for the majority of people. And there's a lot of, this is a bit longer than an elevator pitch, I fully appreciate that, but it's super exciting. As you can probably tell, I can talk about it all day, but we're trying to revolutionize and disrupt in a very tangible sense real estate finance and opening that up to everybody to invest in what they choose, when they choose to, how they choose. And there really should be, less concern maybe about trusting people with their money. You know, your football club, whatever it may be, it's not going anywhere anytime soon. Have a little faith in that. And you're already passionate about it, but there is an opportunity for you to put your money where your mouth is and show your belief in your club and own a piece of it, own a piece of that history as well, I would say. And there's lots of, we spoke about marketing earlier, there's lots of fun marketing stuff that we say around that. So
sure.
One of the fun things we say is, own your passion and build the future. So as an investor, as a fan of whatever it is, you can come along, you can own a piece of it. And if you're the owner, hold on, you've got this incredible financial resource through the tens, hundreds, millions of people that believe in you and what your thing does, that you could tap into if you have the tools. And that's where I realise sits.
So, I mean, it sounds a lot like facilitating crowdfunding to a degree, right?
To an extent. The way I tend to think of it is it's the framework. I'll be careful what I say, but it's the framework and the infrastructure for people to spontaneously form their own distributed investment, which is a grandiose way of saying you've got an asset owner that needs X million pounds. Let's just say football club because it's easy, and you've got 10 million fans. Well, you can connect them very, very cost efficiently with a blockchain platform and almost impromptu invest in whatever. We want to build a new stadium. Okay, it's going to cost us £1 billion, but I've got 10 million fans, and they're going to put £100 in each. Okay, there's the maths done.
So what's the advantage for the fans then in that scenario? What do they get out of it? So, I mean, presumably because if they're not buying shares in the company, right? And this is, you talked about refinancing a few times. Is this specifically for that instance in a property's kind of life cycle or a business's life cycle? Like, how do we understand that? So what are they actually owning as a result of this? What's the benefits to them?
No, absolutely. It's a fair question. It's what they're owning is a piece of the finance. The easiest way to think about it is it's like owning a bond. And when you own a bond, okay, you go to the bond market, and we all know gilts are in trouble at the moment for various reasons, not least of which is the Chancellor. So you go and buy a bond, and it has a face value of £100, and it gives a yield, and you'll get whatever interest rate, coupon rate applies, and that's in its simplest form. That's a loan you're giving to the government. Whether or not you want to loan to the government is a different question, but that's what's happening. And but that's broadly how loans, or certainly syndicated loans, work anyway. You've got a loan, somebody leads that, and then sells parts of it off in the background. Well, we're just using that, but to a much greater degree, with much greater cost efficiency. But for an investor, or I tend to think of them as fans and supporters, actually it's about ownership in your passion. It's about owning a piece of history in whatever it is, and football clubs and all these things have great histories. Or perhaps a more modern example that somebody mentioned to me was renewable energy. Or maybe you're a big believer in green tech, clean tech, whatever you want to call it, but renewable energy, and you want to invest in solar farms. Brilliant. That's very capitally intensive. Come to this platform. You and X million other people from around the world can do the same thing, and you can all own a solar farm in wherever it happens to be located. No fixed.
But again,
place.
that's not because they're investing and getting shares in return for that.
No,
right.
No, you own a piece of the finance. So in its simplest form, it's just an interest-bearing loan. And the reason we start with that is basically because they're the simplest type of instrument you can create. And we have to be very mindful that these are securities. There is a regulatory requirement around that, and we have to be cognizant of that. And we're not at any point suggesting we're going to do anything unlawful or in breach of any regulations. It's all to be compliant. But it's very simple. I lend you £100 at an interest rate of 10%. You'll pay me 110 back. It's crudely. That's what we're saying, and that's the simplest way to explain it. To lots and lots of people.
And so then, how and when could fans, investors get a return on their investment?
Well, like any commercial loan, because essentially that's what it plays into. It'll be quarter days, or it'll be monthly, or whatever the terms are. And there's a lot of elements that need to go into this. But broadly speaking, once the interest is paid, that's you get some interest tokens that reflect the fact that you are now owed some money, and you can be able to cash that out in the usual sort of way. But yeah, it's very direct, and it's much more direct, and it's direct between the developer or the asset owner and the investor. There's no bank in between. It's just, this has happened, and because of how the smart contracts will operate on the blockchain, all of that's immediate.
Right.
Facebook will pay interest. Oh, I've got my interest. It's deposited into my wallet, and I can realize that. I realize if I wish to.
Okay, so then, and as you can tell, I'm very curious about this. So then, what happens in a circumstance where maybe, let's say, going to the football stadium sort of thing again, there's a target amount that needs to be raised to have that refinancing as an option, but then that target isn't met. What would happen then to all of those that have invested? Is there still some way that can continue to move forward? Because I don't pretend to understand this in the way that you do. Or does that mean that hasn't been successful that particular time? Everyone gets their money given back, and that football stadium goes and looks at other options or tries again in future. What happens in a scenario like that?
No, you're right. There's always a risk that things aren't hit, or sometimes things are overhit, and that's
right.
That's another problem. It must be a bad thing to have too much money. But there's a number of ways we're looking at handling that. One is partnerships, relationships with various funds that we have, and can we set up almost an ability to soak up whatever's left. And
right, like an emergency top-up fund kind of thing.
A lot of technical things that we're working out in the background around that. But yeah, that's on the first view, we would hope that the funds, whomever they are, fully fund it, and we don't need to worry about any top-up funding, for example, after that. But yeah, there is always a risk that these things are not funded. Maybe it's not an exciting enough project. Maybe it doesn't attract enough investment. But then perhaps maybe that's quite telling. If you're trying to do something and nobody cares and nobody's interested, maybe that should tell you something about your project. Maybe that's also a better feedback mechanism, because and every founder and every startup has it when you're trying to attract investment. Getting people excited is one thing. Getting people to give you a letter of intent saying, "Oh, I really like this. Come back and talk to me when you're ready." To then getting to a point where they'll say, "And here is some money. Thank you very much." Wildly different. And so the acid test is, well, whether or not somebody will give you that money. And maybe the same is true for the projects. And so maybe there's an interesting, I don't know, maybe I'm just adding on to my CTO's build now, which he won't thank me for. I'm sure, no, I don't want to build that module. But
our CEOs are very good at that.
Yeah.
3 a.m. Oh, I've just had another idea for an entire set of wireframes. And
send an email.
Can we build this tomorrow? Yeah.
But that's, it's quite interesting. Maybe there is a metric for understanding, understanding the desire of people. And it's not that we're exclusive. I should also say we're not exclusive just to individual investors. We have some good links with various funds that we will invite to participate on. There is some drive actually for funds to begin to tokenize their holdings, which is quite interesting and quite for liquidity purposes is the idea. And there's a lot of startups trying to create liquidity for like private shares and things like that, which is all very interesting. And this is in a similar sort of vein. And to be able to do that, and there is opportunity for everybody to get involved and in many ways simplify it. This is a much more efficient way of raising money and simplify the entire process for those as well. But and what you allude to, I would say, is the one of the challenge of scaling for true for any startup. Okay, you've set out and you've got your MVP. Okay, how do we actually get people to use this thing? And that's that will happen. It's not build it and they will come. I'm not suggesting that. But
hi, a friendly reminder to share this episode with your network, like and subscribe. And if you are feeling really supportive, please consider reviewing the show on the podcast platform of your choice. It all really helps support what we do. Thank you. Now back to the show.
As time goes on, and we have interest or pre-interest, if you will, from some, we'll begin to scale that up, and there will. The more interesting part is, as a marketplace, there's a breadth of opportunity that can be presented and will be presented to anyone, anywhere. And so, from a developer's point of view, it's like, it's my fans and things, but if I need bigger chunks of money and maybe I don't have enough funds to do that. Actually, there's still other sources, other pools of wealth connected to this platform. I know it's really tricky. It's a really good question. You allude to the difficulty in scaling.
Right.
That remains true for every startup.
Right. There are challenges for every startup in that sense. Yeah. And so, I mean, how do you? What category is your startup in? Is it prop tech? Is it fintech? Is it Web3? Is it all of the above?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. A bit of everything.
Yeah.
No, I think the way we are the infrastructure provider for.
Right.
I suppose fintech is the closest because we are talking about finance that sits in real assets, specifically real estate. Prop tech, we're adjacent to that as well. There are shades of grey in all of these things, but we are blockchain based, and one would say, well, therefore you are also Web3. And yes, all of that is true. I think what we alluded to, what we spoke about in the first part was, who cares when it comes to the technology?
Right.
And yes, we use blockchain, and yes, we are Web3, and yes, we are fintech maybe, and yes, we are prop tech maybe. But does that really matter? No, we're a marketplace
And it's not as important as it was, say, 5, 6, 7 years ago, to put that up front, especially when speaking to potential future stakeholders, right? Yeah.
But people love this. People are obsessed with categorizing things. And,
Yeah.
what box can I put you in?
Mm.
And I don't like that. I said, well, kind of everywhere.
Mm.
But surely that's the nature of holistic solutions, is that actually you're not one thing. Actually, you're cutting across that.
Yeah, it's also strange as well because we don't do that with any other categorization of technology within tech startups. So we don't say, well, I'm Java tech, or you know what I mean, or I'm React tech. Like we don't do that, but for some reason with Web3 we put it out as this, which obviously I know that behind it there's a whole other set of categorization in terms of code type bases and all that, but it feels like we're putting the underlying technology up front as the definition of what category the product sits in, which isn't the case. So Web3 shouldn't, in my opinion, be considered its own category in that sense. It sits below the true categories which sit above it, like fintech, marketplaces, SaaS, B2B, whatever. Like that's really what it should be. It should be like that's up front. And whether or not, I guess it's just really to appease certain institutional investors who say we just don't invest in this, we do invest in that. But it seems pointless to do that as well, especially in this day and age when there's a huge amount of different types of technologies to leverage to create your vision. So as long as you're creating this thing, you invest in fintech, well, we've done it. It just so happens we use Web3 in order to, but it does this. That's the important thing. It solves this problem, and that problem's worth billions. Do you want in or not? Like, it shouldn't really matter what underlying technology is behind it. It could be run by hamsters and sellotape and duct tape. You know what I mean? It doesn't matter as long as it solves the problem that you report to. Someone's going to say,
like to see that data center.
Hamster tech.
Data center.
Yeah. I know plenty of people that have built, their MVPs that have almost been like that. Do you know what I mean? Like, they claim that there's all this automation, this, that, and the other, and it's just like a team of people doing all this manual, laborious stuff. But it's like you've got to fake it till you make it kind of, approach. So it does happen, until they get the money to automate it. But yeah, it's a strange incessant need that we seem to have in this business to categorize things. But so then how does this all sit, I guess, with, well, you touched on competitors before. So there are people trying to do similar things to this, or people that have already launched. I don't know, because I know very, very little about this space, as you can probably tell. So how are they addressing this, and what is it that you see as the sort of missing piece as to why, and why you decided to sort of go for it regardless?
Very broadly. So real world asset, tokenization, RWA, it's all very buzz phrasey, et cetera, et cetera. And particularly when it comes to real estate, I've found it tends to fall into one of two categories in terms of what the disruptor is. And the first one is, well, we've got this company and it owns some real estate, and we are going to tokenize the shares in that company, and you can own one of those tokens. In a very crude analysis, I should say, that just strikes me as bizarre. Why would you do that? If you're buying tokens,
share is already a form of token. You don't need
share. Yeah, sure. You really sort of around that. Yeah. Shares are tokens, so that's not disruptive.
Yeah.
And so what I own a piece of a company which, legally speaking, has absolutely nothing to do with the real estate asset that sits underneath it. Now, it might be a single asset holding company, in which case you can infer some sort of value. Assets worth this, therefore company must be worth that, more or less. Okay. But really, what are those tokens or what are those shares going to give me? And I could guess right now, there'll probably be a B share. I'm sure there'll be no voting rights, because why would you give away voting rights? Would a dividend ever be declared? No, even if it's making money, why would I ever declare a dividend? As I'm running a business, I want to reinvest, or I want to do other things. That's crazy. And so, as an investor, I'm holding a token that probably gives me the right to what? If it goes up in value and if it gets sold, and there's already too many ifs in that statement for my liking as an investor, that's how I'm going to get my money. Or the other way that you sometimes see it done is you own some sort of token that is representative of some unit in a fund. And again, and then the fund puts all your money together and goes and buys stuff. Again, you're not really owning any sort of real estate. It's very indirect. You've got to get through the fund window first. Do you pass the investor metrics to be able to do that? High net worth, more sophisticated, whatever you might need to be. What's the minimum buy-in? Tends to be very expensive. On average, it's probably £10,000, £15,000, but a lot of funds require you to pledge a lot more. And so, again, it's very indirect, and you're not really in the position that I would suggest as an investor you want to be in. And I say that because the value in real estate doesn't really sit in the real estate as such. Yeah, it operates, and maybe it produces some return and some revenue and things. But really, well, think about what the bank does, or think about if you're the house for a casino or you're the bookmaker, where does all the money sit? The money sits with the banks and with the funds and with the casino and with the bookmaker. That's where you want to be. You want to be in a position where it's your money doing the work, being lent, and getting interest paid back, or whatever the return is from that. And as an individual, that's very difficult, because you're not going to be sat there with tens of millions of pounds pretending to be your own bank. But you and 10 million of your friends, or however many of your friends, in whatever area of your particular interest is, might have that much. And if you all come together and it's 100 quid, and that's probably affordable, let's say for the average, sports fan or theatre goer or whatever your particular passion is, that's probably achievable in and around that level, maybe a bit lower. We're still looking at some of these things. And you can do something really interesting and very personally exciting with your money and achieve a better return than an ISA could. I think maybe you get 5% now if you're lucky. Probably better than an index-linked fund will do once you take out fees and things and inflation. And you can invest in the things that you love and things you actually care about. And that personal connection becomes very important. And I mentioned community as well before. You and a like-minded bunch of people can get together and make a difference in your community. That's very empowering.
There was something else I wanted to ask about. This will be my last question on this, and then we'll move on to the things I wanted to ask you about. But am I right in my understanding of this then, that this could also, in theory, apply to businesses or organisations that are somewhat in distress? So, say if they were in a financial situation which meant maybe they couldn't afford to refinance, or they may have to consider closing shop, or for whatever reason, that actually having this as an option for refinancing could mean they could survive, but with that community support. Complicated, and I don't pretend to understand any of it, to be honest.
But it's an interesting problem.
It is, yeah, and it's a big one right now, up and down the country. That's why I was wondering if it was applicable. But look, I want to switch gears a little bit because of and look, it's been all very interesting. You explaining. I realise in a bit more depth, and that's helped me understand it. And really, this entire the entire point of the show is just to appease my own curiosity. And sorry if anyone listening gets bored. I don't really care, but sorry, fans. I appreciate your support. But I'm curious to know a bit more, just sort of to from now until to bring us to the end of the episode, to know a bit more about kind of how you found this transition. Obviously, from into founderdom, right? Because of it's very unique. Like, not to sort of blow smoke up our own asses or anything as founders. Like, it's not like it's we're saving the world and doing all amazing things in that sense. But it is a very unique and interesting journey. And I'm curious to know, like, when you sort of first dived into it, what were some of the things, the expectations or assumptions maybe you had around being a founder that were completely blown out of the water, and some things that you just really were unexpected about being a founder that you've kind of just learned the hard way, I guess?
We spoke about marketing earlier, didn't we?
Well, yeah, aside from marketing.
Oh my goodness me. Wow. But no, I think there's a number of things. I've probably been quite entrepreneurially minded throughout my career. I've always looked to do different things, learn different things. It's the nature of who I am. Fascinated by the world around me and trying to understand different things, learn different things. And one of the things you very quickly become aware of is the lapses in maybe all of our educations doesn't really prepare you for the realities of business as much as schools, etc., they teach you the maths, but they don't really teach you economics, or they teach you I don't know, appreciation of certain things, but they don't really teach you about how to sell anything.
I mean, you could say that about life in general, really.
Yeah,
I mean, school doesn't really prepare you for adulthood. Full stop.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, adulting is hard.
Yeah.
But so I was reasonably well prepared, and I'd done a lot of, before I even started the Venture Builder, I'd done a lot of things on my own, looking at different elements, to try and understand it, and reading a lot of around it as well. I see some of the books beside you, like, you've got Start With Why, Senek's book, and is that Thiel's book, 0 to 1, I think, I would see. Amongst others, yeah. So there's but these sorts of books, these are great. They really open your eyes and make you think from people who are very practical and had very practical experiences, and they're trying to boil that down and convey that, communicate that. And so I thought I was reasonably well prepared. And what I found was that the answer was yes and no. Yes, certain things I understood reasonably well, but
If you are enjoying this episode and want to support the show, please like, subscribe with notifications turned on, and let us know your thoughts and opinions in the comments below. This lets YouTube know we are doing something right. Back to the show.
looking back, I want to say a shortcut thinking, but you make certain leaps here and there just because the nature of the beast is I've got to get to this point. But going back and actually looking a lot more carefully, certainly at the market, the technology, what was truly happening, doing a lot deeper analysis and trying to understand, well, does this sit in here or is it a complete outlier, which might not be a bad thing. Certainly understanding that, because and the reason I say that is sort of Web3, blockchain, etc. It's a very dynamic space, and it's continually evolving, and it's evolving not only technologically but legally, and in multiple jurisdictions, everyone's doing something slightly different, which is hard to navigate and come to, well, what do we build? How do we satisfy all this? But we think we've found the right approach now. And so it was really, in some ways, confirmatory that maybe I was thinking about things in the right way in terms of looking at the problem. How do we solve the problem? How do we do the analysis? I don't know. But one big thing, and you've mentioned it, is that selling aspect. And you very quickly realize that every conversation you're having is sales, and you're selling this idea. And whether or not you just sat there having a conversation with somebody, oh, I've got this idea about this, that, and the other. No, you're selling it. Sell. And what you're doing is you're testing to validate your idea, because we all need validation, else what's the point? But also testing to see if they'll buy. Do they want to know more? Is this even remotely interesting to them? Are they going to contact me again? Is this worth a second conversation? And not only that, but there's whole stakeholder groups. So, investors, as in people who will come and invest in you as a business, and with a view to getting a return in the future. Or, VCs. Everyone makes that mistake. They go and contact VCs out the gate and think, brilliant, let's get 20 million in VC money. Nope. Lots of polite, go away, come back when you've actually got something.
Yeah.
But you've got to start those conversations at some point. And then, well, who's going to use the platform? Can I convince people to actually come and join a wait list? Can I convince them to give me their email address? I mean, it's not as high bar, but it's surprisingly difficult to do. And then, will people actually come and invest on this? Asset owners actually go and say, yeah, that's a brilliant idea. Let's go down this route. I'll do more of this myself. I'll save myself a fortune. Everything that sits around that. So as the founder leading this, you have to be across every single element of what you're doing. And, for a long time, it was myself trying to articulate what it was I needed built. And now, thank goodness now I've brought on a CTO who actually does know how things are built. So those conversations are a lot easier, but it's still a lot of me translating what's in my head. No, this is what I need to do, and I need to do it for these reasons. And this is what I need built. And then in the future, these are the other things we'll need, because we need to do whatever else. And yeah, being able to lead effectively across all of those elements is surprisingly challenging. It's good. I enjoy it, which makes me sound crazy probably, but you become very very consciously aware of it. It's like making the back, oh yeah, I need to do something about marketing and sales and something over there about investing and other stuff. But until you go through it and you do it yourself, and then you realise, yeah, okay, there's a lot here that I need to work through.
It's true. It's the art of context switching, right? But which not everyone is built for. But you absolutely need that, and it only gets more and more intense as a company progresses. That need to context switch, and then very bizarrely, it completely dissipates, which is a really interesting thing. Which is when I've talked to, as you can imagine, founders at all different stages in their founder journey. I guess some who have done it multiple times, and what is a very common theme is there's a certain point where early on, like we said, you've got a lot of different context switching, looking at different things, and then it gets more and more intense as the company builds, departments grow, personnel grows, the stakes get bigger, and that context switching just gets insane until it suddenly gets to a point where, if all goes right, where you no longer need to do that. All the pieces are in place and everyone's doing it for you, and usually at that point, the founders get bored. They're like, wait a minute, I'm not needed anymore. Like I've been needed to do all these things all this time. Like, and that's when they go, right, okay, on to the next thing. Time to sell, time to sell my shares, whatever. Move on to the next thing. But you touched on something really important, though, I think, which is really important for people to hear us maybe expand on a little bit as well, which is this idea of you trying to communicate what's in your head to someone who's like maybe more technically minded, right? Because that is where I've seen an enormous amount, and I mean an enormous amount of startups fail or potentially fail, is at that juncture, because it is very difficult, I think, as a non-technical founder to express or to really even to refine their thinking, but behind an idea, let alone explain that to someone and get them to go off and ideally build your vision. That is the bit where you tend to see people spending way too much money. And I hear stories all the time, I'm sure you have done too, where someone says, I went off and this software studio, they took all my money and they fucked it all up and they built absolute crap, and I'm sat there just thinking, no, they didn't. You didn't explain it well. Like, that's the problem. Because if you don't have any experience doing that in leading a product and leading a dev team, that's inevitable. Of course it's going to happen, because of the way you communicate and the way they communicate are completely different. And so, yeah, I see it all the time. And I'm fortunate in that I sort of worked my way up in startups where my involvement in working with product teams became more and more and more over time. So I learned that language and how to communicate things succinctly and directly and express views and ideas in the right way that I knew would be interpreted correctly. Not to mention, on top of that, you usually have an actual language barrier too, because quite often dev teams are offshore, and so they aren't. English isn't always their first language, so you've got that to contend with too. So I think that's a very important thing to point out, that I would assume one of the values that you had in being part of the venture builder with Block Dojo 2 is that they're able to facilitate that to some degree, and because they understand both the language you speak and the language that the more product-minded side of things speak, they can bridge that gap and avoid sometimes those very expensive mistakes.
Yeah, no, you're quite right. There's a challenge. I suppose I'm fortunate in some ways that I have a semi-technical background.
Right.
I studied engineering and sciences at university, so I have some very nominal understanding in the space.
Gives you an advantage for sure, yeah.
But you're right in terms of, okay, I've got this idea in my head, and one of the ways I had to get it out of my head was I took a whiteboard and drew a diagram, filled the entire board with lines and boxes and explanations, and that's what I presented when we had that. When we had a technical presentation. Okay, what is it you want to build? This is what I want to build, and the technical team. Shout out to Varma there. He's very good at translating that and very good at coming back and saying, we can do this or we can do that. We can't do both. What is the and that's the question I couldn't answer is, well, what's the art of the possible? I don't know. It looks like everything should be possible in software world. I know is the answer. We can do this or we can do that. And so I had to make several perhaps hard choices. Now, but I make those choices in the comfort, in the knowledge that actually, chances are we're going to pivot anyway. We're going to rebuild something anyway. So this is the first bite of the cherry to get something that we can look at, talk about, evaluate, and test in its semi-real environment before ultimately we probably have to change it anyway. Technology changes, things evolve. And
well, yeah, I mean, there's a reason it's called an MVP, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's got to be minimal.
Yeah, precisely. And that's the thing. But and again, you have to go through that. This idea, fail fast, etc., is where it comes in. It's okay. Well, this is working, hasn't worked, or whatever it may be, right? But you're at sufficiently early stage for that not to really be a cost concern. Maybe if you're a bigger enterprise and you've already spent X million on developing something, then sunk cost fallacy comes in and you carry on. But yeah, again, the venture, and that was another reason to join the program was having that technical side whilst I sorted out, bringing on board a CTO in the meantime. But but I do appreciate, actually, what I would say is you're a two-founder team, technical and non-technical. You've still got to be able to communicate, and there's between myself and my CTO now, there's lots of conversations. What have you got in your head? Okay, well, this is what I drew before. This is the diagram I drew. This is the other thing I drew. This is how I think about this. And it's just a lot of conversation and trying to articulate it and draw pictures and all the rest of it. And yeah, just to convey that, like the core of what it is that we need to build. Now, but only time will tell. I don't know how that's going to turn out.
Soon find out, I guess.
Yeah, it's looking great. It looks like it does the things we need it to do.
You have a very important, or have had a very important thing there, which is someone who's prepared to say, well, that might not work, or that won't work, or you can only do this, or you can only do that. Unfortunately, a lot of founders who I know again who have gone off and worked, and this isn't the case with everybody. I know plenty of instances where they've gone off and gone to private developers or software houses or whatever and got good results, but more often than not, unfortunately, you hear the opposite, and that's because quite often they're being paid and they don't really want to say no. Like they'll say yes to everything, and it's something to be very mindful of. I think with some of these companies is they don't want to disappoint, they don't want to turn away the business. They don't want to de-scope on something. They want the scope to be where it is because obviously it means a bigger payday. We've got to be practical. So they very rarely have those conversations with you and saying, well, you can either do this or you can do that. You can't do both. They'll just say, is this possible? And they'll usually say yes. And that's really problematic because what it means is they go off, they try and do it, they screw it up, and then you're left with a product that you didn't expect, or it doesn't quite function how you expected it to because there's conflicting things happening within the software. So I think I suppose essentially what I'm saying is I can't speak highly enough of accelerators, incubators, and these sort of venture builders for these reasons because they've been there and they've done that, and this isn't something that you necessarily know going in, and a lot of the time people aren't prepared to tell you of these potential pitfalls to watch out for, so yeah, that's great. It sounds like you very much got off to the right foot. So when are you expecting to launch? I mean, are you going to be launching sort of like beta and all of that? What's the plan?
But like I know all of these technical terms, yeah, of course, the beta will be available next. No, we think so. My CTO Iñaki, he's been working away, bless him as well, over Christmas, putting various things together. If I can sound very untechnical, so there's a front end and a back end, and they're being stuck together at the moment. That's okay. By the extent of my,
I think that's all the correct technical terminology. Yeah. They're being glued together. Yeah,
it's not like I know what I'm talking about.
That's what being a founder is all about, man. Just trying to sound like you know what you're talking about.
Yeah. It looks like he knows what he's on about. Okay,
yeah,
uses the right words. But anyways, they've all been stuck together. So there's a lot of clever technical stuff happening to connect all these things.
Sure.
And that should be ready within the next couple of weeks, and then it's all what they call testnet, and it will be in testing. And we've got a handful of I don't know, just very crude examples, just to can we do this? Can we get the tokens moving in the right way, representing things, etc., and that should be ready in the next couple of weeks, and we'll be demonstrating that to some of our early potential investors and real estate partners. It won't be open for everybody to come and have a look at and play with. It's not that kind of thing. And although hopefully people will be able to come and have a look at the website when it's updated, there's just a holding page there. It's not very interesting. It's just there to mark time. But eventually, people will be able to come along and sign up and see what it'll look very familiar. It looks very much like a marketplace once you're into it. with opportunities in very sort of familiar. If you've ever looked at, I don't know, something like Seedrs as it then was, or Republic, or crowdfunding sites, it'll look very familiar to that.
Right.
That sort of eye, and that little bit estate agent window, come and look at things and see what you want to invest in. This will all happen along a roadmap. It's not a free for all from day one, because it can't be, regulatory requirements notwithstanding. But you can come along, you can sign up, and you will be able to see a little bit of what we're
building. Yeah. And you're gonna be raising pre-seed as well. Is that right?
We're raising at the moment. We have some early commitment, which is fantastic news. There will be a more formal open round. That's all on me to finish some of the legal side of things that I've been holding off, pending some other bits and pieces. We have got our SEIS Advanced Assurance, if that helps anybody watching this. So that will be available. And I invite everybody to get in touch. And if you're interested, of course, happy to have conversations with investors, or even future users or asset owners who are sick and tired of dealing with banks.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll be putting your LinkedIn in the description of this episode for anyone interested, and any information on I Realise, I'll pop that in there too. Well, look, I'm going to let you go because of you've got a lot to do, and I'm sure you want to be cracking on with that. But it's been wonderful speaking with you. Thank you so much for taking the time. Like I said, I will put your information in the description below so people can go and check you out, connect with you, chat with you. Check out I Realise, all that kind of stuff, and if investors are listening and everything, they might be keen to speak with you about future rounds and so on.
Absolutely.
So yeah, all that's left to say is thank you so much. Have a wonderful day, and hopefully we'll speak again very soon.
Thank you very much, Greg.
Cheers. Take care. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.
Thank you for listening and/or watching. Please like and subscribe, or if you are listening via podcasting service and want to show your support, consider rating or leaving a review. It really helps. See you next week.